Okay, I'd like to thank all our friends who have come and all those who are following us and will follow us in this report through Skype and so on. There are many people. This is how we have organized the meeting to have things run as smoothly as possible. One thing I think must be said right off. There was something we saw up on the screen. Perhaps we can douse the lights. Romano, have you seen this photograph? This was a photo that was taken in 1988. Perhaps it was just put up there by chance. You can't see it very well, says the chairman, because there's not much light. And 1988, in fact, this was the meeting from the university to work AlmaLaurea, a quantum jump towards employment. As I say, this is something that we put up there just by chance. But it also signals the fact that we are 20 years old, as the Vice-Chancellor has in fact said. And as Fabio Romersi Monaco knows, he was then the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Bologna, and he gave an important impetus to the birth of AlmaLaurea. I can't forget that we, in fact, were celebrating the 9th centenary of the University of Bologna at the time, and this was gave us an impetus to develop an important data bank, as we, in fact, did develop and now use, with a series of much more rapidly retrievable and accurate data. Of course, I'd like to thank all those who have worked with us and have made AlmaLaurea great. There were just a couple of us at the start, and they're here today. And today, we have become a company, in fact. That employs about 60 people. I'd like to thank them for what? I'd like to thank them especially because we have been able to start from the bottom up, as it were. As Mr. Romersi Monaco, the former Vice-Chancellor, said, we started from very small beginnings without any public funding. And this enabled us to grow considerably. What was the idea behind the initial step? We wanted to go from deductive reasoning, from top down, which is characteristic of our country and characterizes it with the risk that we never arrive at conclusions, to go from that to an inductive reasoning approach. In other words, understanding what we need out of the data that we have, and therefore allow us to reach conclusions much more swiftly and much more effectively. Now, AlmaLaurea has often gone against the stream of what happens in our country, and we did this bearing in mind what Luigi Einaudi, the famous Italian, said, and he in fact put this in a 1955 book of his, Useless Reasonings and Musings. In other words, he said, if the governments and if the ministries don't understand sufficiently to be able to take decisions, well, the risk is that nothing in fact is actually decided and no headway is made. We, in other words, looked towards Galileo Galilei, and he invited the cardinals of the Holy See to look into the telescope, and Bertolt Brecht picks up this. If we don't look into the telescope, we will not understand what is going on. We won't understand what is happening in our country. Unfortunately, this invitation fell by the wayside. When AlmaLaurea started, the basic objectives that we set ourselves were three, by and large. The first was to look at the profile of graduates, to have a profile of graduates. In other words, to rapidly put together data and put together documentation that would help the university, the vice-chancellor, the lecturers, and the population of the university and students as where it was best to go and study. And then we wanted to look at employment data, and this is something we're going to look at in the 16th survey today. It's true that you can get out of university with top marks, but if after 1, 3, or 5 years that a highly qualified person can't find a job, well, there is a great risk that, in fact, there is a disconnect between the university and the entrepreneurial world. And the other thing that we set ourselves was to set up an AlmaLaurea data bank, which means simply making available all the curricula on this data bank. And we have 2 million people in the data bank today, and that this data bank can help bring together supply and demand. Now, these have been things have been carried out on the basis of certain parameters. In other words, that this database be reliable, be continuous, and continual. Because if it's not done in that way, it won't work. I would like to go back to Brodel. In fact, the only statistical data by itself, he said, are not, in fact, of use. Fernand Brodel said that if, in fact, you study civilization in the long term, this helps you to understand the situation overall. And we go back to that. Recently, in fact, going to Tunisia, where we are building something very important for all the regions of AlmaLaurea, I saw the statue of Khaldun, who was born in Tunis in 1300, and he died in Cairo in the early after the 14th century. And in fact, this recalled to me that, in fact, long before the Christian era, he accompanied his son to school, and in fact noted that, in fact, going to school and learning is something so very useful, and it stands up and against the tests of time like a mountain. And this recalled to me, this made me think of Khaldun and his writings. He said, science and learning are inseparable from well-being. And this is, of course, key, and a key thought. Romano Prodi, in fact, took this up and recently said, when he talked about the countries of the southern rim of the Mediterranean, that it was very important to include these for the well-being of everyone. So if we look at the international cultural context of our survey, usually I say this at the end, but I'll say it now. I think it's very important to overcome a nationalist rationale. You know, we look at everything, we understand everything, and we discuss things, but from a very narrow point of view, without looking further afield. Now, if we look at higher education expenditure as a percentage of the GDP, well, this expenditure is very, very little. I remember that a recent minister, a lady minister, said that probably if we could save on university expenditure, that would be a good thing, and we would do something well for the country. But in fact, this was in fact the minister who in 1862, when Italy had 85% of illiterate people. That minister, in fact, said these things at that time when basic literacy was necessary. But I think it's important to underline this. We, in fact, are still, unfortunately, investing very little in higher education. If we see and consider Italy is spending 100, Spain and France spends much more. Spain spends half, again, what we spend. And the expenditure for R&D is very similar. Italy, in fact, is at the bottom of the list for R&D expenditure and investment. But if we look at the expenditure of companies and enterprises, it has to be underlined very strongly that the investments made by entrepreneurs in R&D are, in fact, 1/3 of what German investment is. And again, if you spend very little and you spend it badly, that is all important to underline. As Alexander in the 1st century AD said in his manual of military maneuvers, he said, in fact, in a commentary, it was said that Alexander understood how important it was to have friends next to friends and brothers next to brothers, because when you're in battle, in fact, if you are near somebody who is close to you, you fight even better. And I think that this, again, is something that a lesson we still have to learn. We know that, in fact, we have had a reduction of 30% of reduction in the young population over the years. We have gone from 9.5% of people who have a degree to 39% now of people with a degree. And also we have a higher degree of attendance in class. We also see that language skills have increased. We also have a closer relationship today between enterprises and university. 55% of graduates now conclude and get their graduate having under their belt a period of work experience during their university career, and also for study abroad is growing and continues to grow. And now 14% of graduates have had some study time abroad. We hear in the newspapers all the time that we are seeing a larger number of people going to the universities, but that's not true. People going to the universities, in fact, are less. This because of the demographic fall, and also because of the fall in the older students, who are now fewer. We have now 74%, which has gone down to by 10%. We have also the fact that in fact less people go to university, perhaps because there are other sorts of courses available. And also many families are finding it very difficult now in these times to support people who the youngsters going to university, the direct and indirect classes and costs. And indeed, this despite some stalwart efforts to try and give grants and so on. And then also we have a larger percentage now of immigrant children who are less interested in going to the university. Now, if we look at the population, the adult population between 55 and 64 years of age, if we look at this adult population, we see that only 11% of the adults in this age bracket have a university degree.
much less than what was the case, and the situation is also true for the population aged from 25 to 34. If we now look at the classification of the statistics according to the OECD definitions, that is 5A graduates, those that have trained in research and can get highly specialized jobs. And if we look at 5B graduates, we see that there is quite a large proportion of these jobs, not only in the healthcare sector, which should be classified in a different way from 5A to 5B, so from a more general to a more specialized type of job. I think this is something that people in the ministries miss. Instead, they are more interested in increasing this opportunity for graduates that have followed a 3-year degree course. Let's see what happens in the population from 30 to 35 years getting a degree in European countries. Our situation is not very good. 40% of people should graduate by 2020. Instead, you see that we're still lagging behind. I think what we should do is consider those who are employed in highly specialized jobs. Let's see what happens in Europe. In the period from 2007 to 2012, we have more than 21% employed individuals. This value has grown. In Germany, it has grown too. In Spain, exactly the same trend was followed. In France and in the UK, we have these curves. Let's see what happened to Italy. Indeed, the situation has dropped precipitously. We started out from a much lower level and continued decreasing this value. Please remember that according to the international classifications, in Italy we have lawmakers, top managers, intellectual professionals, scientific experts, and highly qualified experts among the very specialized professions. Let's see what happens to those who have qualified as managers. Now you see the situation for Europe and Italy. We see that only 5% of managers in Germany have a low title, as against 28% in Italy. Let's see what happens as far as high school diplomas are concerned, or higher education certificates and diplomas. Concerning degrees and higher education, 24% of managers have such a qualification, while 28% don't go beyond the compulsory school. Nobel graduate Becker wrote that the equipment, the hardware, is very important within an undertaking, but capable people have to use this underwear and equipment, and they should be both the employers and the employees. Let's see what happens then in the family-owned and family-managed undertakings. Basically, as you can see, there is a high level of such undertakings everywhere. But it's especially in Italy that we have family-owned and family-managed companies, two-thirds of them. This is very important to notice, because it's true that you may have family-owned undertakings, but the fact that you also have a managing director or top management from the family is a bit different from owning the company. Let's see this OECD survey, which is a recent one. Here we have the different groupings, subject groupings. Let's see what happens according to the degree course. For example, humanities. You see that the OECD pointed out that 25% is accounted for by these graduates. In the United States, it's 29. Bloomberg last summer declared that he was very concerned about the high number of graduates. So we have put together the total for technical and scientific areas. We have added physics, chemistry, biology, agricultural sciences, pharmacy, medicine, and so on and so forth. You see, our assessment, our evaluation is very different from what is commonly assumed. We have a 37% in the OECD area, and we are in Italy at the same level, much higher than Germany. I don't know whether we perhaps have a larger number of people studying scientific subjects than going abroad. AlmaLaurea is now 20 years old. We have reached 64% of the universities, 80% of the graduates every year. I'd like to point out that the contributions from the Ministry of Education and Research dropped from 1.5 billion to 700,000 this year. What do? We have built up a system whereby we have collected almost 2 billion CVs. What we give back to each university is a fast, a very rapid assessment of their courses, the employment conditions of their graduates, and the number of people who have enrolled in their universities. We have no political or economic interests. After many years of cooperation, we have launched Alma Diploma in 2000, and we haven't got any funds for that. We have launched Alma Orientati, the guidance service. Alma Diploma follows the same trend of AlmaLaurea, including 500 schools. In 2006, we established Alma Orientati, the guidance system. Then we have the high training services for music, which was launched in 2008. We have also considered sheltered groups of the population without any public support. And I must say once again that the support of the Ministry of Labour is not there. There's no support from the Ministry of Labour. We read two articles published by Sergio Rizzo in Corriere della Sera titled "The High Price Jobs." Almost 10,000 employees in employment centers every year the employees are only 35,000. Thanks to these centers. Then Tito Boeri wrote in Repubblica, do not waste money for allowing the young people to earn. You know, the ISFOL centers, the employment centers, employ 1,500 people at the present time now. And I don't think they are successful in finding jobs. Let's look at the survey on the graduates' employment conditions of this year. We worked on 64 universities. The response rates, which are regarded as very little reliable abroad because they thought we were cheating, the response rates were 86% at 1 year, 80% at 3 years, and 75% at 5 years. I'm speaking of the response rates of all graduates. We had set up a reproportioning phase. So each interviewed graduate is given a weight so that the distribution of the variables for reproportioning, type of course, gender, subject, geographical area of residence are actually as they are. Let's see what happened in the last survey. Let's see what happened among the graduates of 2012 and 2007. You see that employment decreased by 16 percentage points as far as first-level graduates are concerned. Among single-cycle graduates, employment dropped by 11 percentage points. And you can see that on the whole, the situation has considerably worsened among first-level graduates. Then please also consider another point. What happens to first-level graduates and single-cycle graduates? If you look at their family background, in 2004, in the years of the pre-reform, 72 out of 100 graduates came from families which had not a graduation in their background. Well, this number has increased for the first-level graduates. It's 70% for the single-cycle graduates. And for single-cycle medicine and engineering graduates, the percentage is 50%. Schleicher, the director of the OECD, said that the education systems have to prepare students for jobs that have not been created yet, and technologies that have not yet been invented, and problems which have not arisen yet. I think this is most important and tells us a lot. Let's forget about this and consider what happens in terms of benefits of an experience abroad. You know, those who studied abroad work in a percentage which is 9% higher 1 year after graduation. The apprenticeship or internship during university studies has increased a lot. In 2000, it was just 9 people out of 100 doing an apprenticeship, now 55. The apprenticeship guarantees future employment. I'll rapidly go through a series of slides which are very well known to everybody. Let me come to the employment outcomes at 1, 3, and 5 years. You know, we still hear that a degree is worthless. Well, we have to break this myth, please remember that graduates work more than high school diploma holders. Let's see what happens to them at 1, 3, and 5 years after graduation. The end of the story is that at 5 years, those that have graduated from a single cycle and first level degree course have an unemployment rate which is still 8%. Last year, this value was 6%. It's increased, but basically there is some degree of unemployment. Those who have a stable employment are much higher in number. And what about their earnings? 1,383 euro in the tax declarations that they make. But does a degree mean that you have greater employability? Well, let's consider the situation up to 64 years. The employment rate of graduates is much higher, considerably higher, than for those who have a high school certificate. And also the income is higher. Unfortunately, wages are compared at the age of 25, 26, and 27. Well, this is a meaningless comparison because, of course, a high school certificate holder has completed high school at the age of 18, so at the age of 25 he would presumably earn more than a graduate who's just graduated. The OECD figures say that graduates earn 48% more. It is often stressed that between 2008 and 2012, unemployment has increased 40%, but among high school certificate holders, you have a twofold increase. Look at this. Here you have the trend over time. Unfortunately, there has been an increase in unemployment, especially among those who have the diploma of the intermediate school. Diploma holders have increased employment by 15 percentage points, and instead we have seen that the situation is different for graduates. On the Women's Day, we have highlighted the differences between men and women. This is the employment rate at 5 years from graduation according to gender. The difference is due to the fact that men work more, 8% more. And let's see also the difference between the north and the south of the country. There's an even wider gap. Now, if we look at those who work after 5 years according to gender, according to whether they're married or not, you see the difference between those who are married and those who are not is 7 percentage points. Look at the values for men and women without children. The difference is not that great, but if they have children, 5 years off, the difference is much greater. The graduate's employment condition, of course, is not the same for all. Look at the situation here, 5 years from graduation, according to the different groups. There is an average, but there is a discrepancy between, for example, the healthcare professions and those from the geology or biology areas. And this is also reflected in the wage 5 years after graduation. There are differences, quite sizable differences. For example, the top group is engineering and the bottom group is psychology. Now, to wrap up, if we consider the net monthly earnings according to gender and area of study, we have women in red, and you see that the difference is €293. But all conditions being the same, this value reduces considerably, and yet it's still very high. Now, some conclusions that we've come to. We have presented a survey, and all this documentation is now available online through our website. Everyone will be able to make their own assessments according to individual universities, degree courses, north, south of the country, etc. Now, to wrap up, we have achieved major accomplishments. We have opened new branches. We have worked for sheltered groups of the population. We have opened branches in Rome and Padua. The thing we're mostly interested in is also dealing with the technical high schools, 62 highly specialized technology schools which opened only recently. We would like to use these schools as well. Well, we may conclude by saying that the European Commission approved 3 major projects with Morocco, Tunisia, Armenia, Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia and Montenegro. The AlmaLaurea model was presented in Washington at the World Bank in June 2013 with great interest. AlmaLaurea is developing new partnerships and cooperation with the universities in South America and Southeast Asia. I think we may conclude by saying that, as I also said on other occasions, we are in a period of crisis, but even during a famine, the farmer would make cuts but would continue sowing. This means investing on young people. As Plutarch said 2,000 years ago, young people are not vessels to be filled, but torches to be lit. We'll present the graduates profile in 2013 at the end of May in Polenzo in the province of Cuneo. We are invited by Piercarlo Grimaldi, a professor who is the rector of the University of Polenzo. I think this is very important, and I think that the many young people with whom we worked really deserve an applause. Thank you very much.